This, of course, is one of the most terrible moments in human memory.
I've been to Dachau and I've been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. I didn't even take any pictures at Dachau because I felt it was too sacred a spot.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of the people, you can't believe, the smell was still there in 1953
Yeah.
of burnt flesh. You
Yeah.
can't forget burnt flesh.
Yeah. This is another thing that just boggles the imagination, how we knew this was going on in the late 1930s. We knew it. The U.S. government was aware of it, but it wasn't our concern.
The Swiss were letting the trains go through Switzerland with the people in it. The Swiss.
It's a troubling time. It's still troubling to this day.
Very troubling. Well, the Swiss made a lot of money off the war, let me tell you.
I think about it and I just, words can't express sometimes just what this meant to so many people and how many.
Well, this gentleman was a tailor in New Bedford, Landau. He wrote the book, and he still had his tattoo on his wrist.
Yeah.
And there was another fellow that ran a little variety store, Sam, lived next door to my daughter. He just moved to New Jersey to be with his son because he's in his 90s now.
I lived in South Carolina for 10 years, and in the line of business that I was in, I became quite good friends with a Jewish fellow who ran a deli and bakery in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. And he had the tattoo
Yep.
with the numbers. And one day, he noticed me looking at it. He started talking. And when I left, I was in tears. I still get choked up thinking about it.
I mean, when you see the pictures of them liberating, a friend of mine, Eli Heinberg, was with the troops that liberated one of the camps, and he said, "You can't." He says, "Nothing I could describe ever in my life that you would even understand."
Yeah. This may not be one of the greatest displays in my mind,
It's just a small display.
but the fact that it's here,
Well, we felt it was
this
important.
speaks volumes.
We felt it was important.
Absolutely. This speaks volumes to anybody who takes a moment to think about it, to remember it, to learn of it. That
Yep.
you can't say enough about this, but at the same time, sometimes words don't.
Words can't express the way you feel.
They don't. The words are inadequate.
If you don't feel it inside, I don't think you're human, but
Yeah.
that's my feeling. But
I'm not trying to grandstand anything
Yeah,
in front of a camera with Alan here and yourself, but having known a few people who ran for 5 years or 6 years, just one step ahead of the Germans.
Yeah. Like I
Just
said,
constantly on the run.
I mean, I was a shutterbug when I was in Europe, but I couldn't take pictures there. I felt it was just
Yeah.
too much. It wasn't right to take
And
pictures.
the picture wouldn't do justice.
Well, it just didn't feel right.
No, no.
Not something I wanted a memory of, really.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't survive it or anything, it just didn't seem right. So I didn't take pictures.
Yeah, that's quite understandable. And it seemed like the more technical we become as the years go by,
Well,
the more ignorant many of us are about this. And there are people today who deny this
still
from all
deny it.
from all walks of life. Even some Americans. There are leaders in various communities who will say this didn't happen.
They still deny the moonwalk too, the
Yeah.
same people. But
Yeah,
what can I say?
that's troubling. That is really troubling.
Yeah, so we have a small display here.
Well, I thank you for that, for sharing this. This is sort of the creme de la creme of the museum. I mean, it's hard to say that because there's so much here that speaks to so many issues, both political, military, civil issues, which is why we have a military service. In fact, 5 of them, the Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Marines, and Air Force. But in its earliest life, this was a Civil War era granite fortress. Fort Tabor or Fort Rodman goes well before that, into the War of 1812 and the American Revolution. There has always been a military presence on this property in one form or another, right through World War II, when the property was finally abandoned and handed over to the city of New Bedford. This particular model was made by my good friend Don Perkins, who comes from Pocasset on Cape Cod. Come on over, Don. What inspired you to do this?
Something to do, number one, and just because I'm involved in lighthouses. This happened to have a lighthouse, but the fort came with it, and I figured that'd be the perfect thing for the area, and it's a challenge to do it, but it turned out beautifully. The people down here received it beautifully. I'm just happy I was able to do it.
How long did this take you?
About a year.
Wow. I know you've done a lot of different models over the years, and I've helped you with a couple of locations where some of your other models are located,
Right.
in coordinating those donations, but this particular one here, I wasn't even aware of until I walked in here one day and I saw your name attached to it.
Well, the thing is, it's just unique. Is at the time they had the Civil War enactment here, and I had it done during that time, and it worked out beautifully. And this happened to be the first model in this particular museum, which was quite the thing. So it's moved around since, like everything else.
Yeah, yeah.
But they've done a great job setting this up on the display here. They are great. So.
Yeah, the detail inside is just, it's a work of art. When I look at this, I've had the good fortune of being inside the fort. I think you have also.
Yeah, I had to, in order to do this model, I had to have up close video of it because it was so detailed. Well, oddly enough, I was just taking pictures of it, and I had forgotten really what I had really done to this thing. Of all the doors and the landings on the backside, and I said, "Gee, that's pretty good."
Yeah. No, I was really astounded that even after all these years, that some of the ironwork is still intact inside that fort.
Yeah.
And you can still see some of the palisades with the arches and where the living quarters were, and how the fort has evolved over time. Besides being just a Civil War fortification, there were additions during World War I and World War II, where there were observation posts over here on top of the fort to coordinate the guns that were being fired at sea level. You can't always see from sea level what you can see from the top of a tall structure. So you have the observation posts in the upper elevations, and working by radio telephone with the gun batteries down below, you can coordinate these guns so they can cover all of Buzzards Bay. And of course, we saw in another detailed plan that there were different types of guns which could fire 3 miles or 7 miles or 10 miles, but the largest and most accurate guns in here could fire effectively at a range of 16 miles. So you could effectively fire a shell from here at Fort Tabor all the way to Gayhead and Martha's Vineyard. And that's quite a ways down the bay.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And of course, the fort itself, which we'll see outside in a few minutes, was never really completed. We only have 2 levels here, the ground level and the ramparts here, with the various bastions, including the lighthouse that we see here, Clark's Point Lighthouse. The lighthouse originally was not here. It was on another site on the property of Fort Rodman, well before Fort Rodman became a reality. But because of the construction of the fort, that old lighthouse became ineffective. So that was dismantled, taken down, and a new structure was put on top of the northeast bastion, where that was the one that was closest to the entrance to New Bedford Harbor. We'll get a look at that as well once we get outside. The close of the Civil War came, and as a result of that, the 3rd level was never completed. The granite for this fort was harvested from quarries that were local to this area, Dartmouth, New Bedford. Wherever they could find granite, it was quarried out. I don't know where the actual quarries were, but they were in southeast Mass. That's a possibility. Some of it may be Quincy granite from my hometown. That was noted for its hardness and for the ability to be such a workable stone. It was easily cut and shaped and polished. But of course, this is a rough exterior. And here we can even see the ports where the cannons were located in different directions. It's too bad we can't get inside, but another time, maybe. But I thank you for doing this and for coming out. I know it's a brief time that you were here with us, but I'm grateful to see you.
Yeah. Well, the main thing is, like I've always said to everybody, people love models. It brings them right up close. They may never, this one here happens to be right out back here, or out front. But for lighthouses, most people will never see that particular lighthouse. They see it modeled up front, and in the process of getting people aware of lighthouses, to save the lighthouses, this is what the whole thing's all about. This is unique in its own, being a fort that it is, and it just, everything worked out perfect for this particular setup. And then with them setting up this museum, everything fell in place perfectly. You know, so it's been great.
Yeah, it's a work of art, and I hope that they keep us here for many, many years to come. You notice the keystones on top of the arches and how there are stones facing it, you know, to form a molding or a trim around it. And the angled walls in here, and the brickwork. Quite frequently in some of these old buildings, the bricks were cut to a certain dimension and thickness and curvature to effectively fit the arches. I mean, the various lines and angles in here, this is a beautiful, beautiful example of a third system of defense. The first system would have been earthen bunkers. I can show you an example of that up in Salem sometime. The second system were brick and wood fortresses. The third system were these granite defenses like this, with walls that are up to 8 to 12 feet thick in some places, virtually impenetrable. A ship firing on it from offshore would have no effect whatsoever. Absolutely no effect. Their cannonballs would bounce off a structure like this, made of granite. In the South, say Charleston, South Carolina, during the early part of the Civil War and the War of 1812, they built fortresses out of palmetto trees. Palmetto trees have a very thick bark on the outer side and a spongy inner core, rather than a wood that we would normally see in a tree. And there were cannonballs that would bounce off of those logs, but they were vulnerable to erosion, wind, weather, and they would eventually deteriorate. I mean, this is a beautifully designed structure. So when we think of the Army Corps of Engineers who engineered and built this, we think of people like Robert E. Lee, Admiral William Shubrick, General Joseph Totten. They were three of the principal designers and engineers behind the construction of fortresses like this. And it's my hope that sometime soon we'll get down to Newport and see Fort Adams, which is even more impressive than this. But this is impressive for the amount of ironwork that's still here in its unspoiled nature. And this is the Clark's Point Lighthouse, which preceded the Butler Flats Lighthouse, which is less than a mile offshore here at the entrance to New Bedford Harbor. Once this light was deemed unusable, in the 1870s era, Butler Flats Lighthouse was constructed. It put this one into a darkened position, if you will. But this was largely restored by the city of New Bedford between 2003 and 2005 at virtually no cost to the taxpayers. But once again, vandals have had their way. They find their ways to sneak in here and take delight in destroying something so historic.